Now available. Paperback and Kindle Unlimited. ISIS, the main event. It's carnage inside of a steel cage when the goddess next door steps in the squared circle with the beast from the boss in this action-packed all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, the main event, paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Wrestler CM Punk and Jack Perry are the latest wrestlers to be suspended by AEW for having an altercation at a pay-per-view event. Now, according to reports, Jack Perry had a confrontation with CM Punk backstage, and as he brushed up against them, they had a physical altercation at the biggest pay-per-view event in the history of AEW All In. And as a result of both men having this altercation, both men were sent home and both men are on suspension. Now, this is the second altercation to take place at an AEW pay-per-view event between talent. The first altercation happened last year at AEW All Out, where CM Punk, after having a media scrum where he basically disrespected AEW founder and president Tony Khan, had a confrontation with Hangman Adam Page and the Young Bucks, also known as the executive vice presidents of AEW, and this altercation led to the suspensions of the Elite, also known as Hangman Adam Page, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks, and also led to CM Punk's career at AEW winding up in limbo. Now, this is the second time that there's been an altercation between AEW talent and CM Punk, and when I look at both of these altercations and the whole issues as related to AEW's just extremely dysfunctional women's division, it really shows me that the problem isn't the wrestlers. No, the problem is Tony Khan. Now, when I look at Tony Khan, I really think about something Gordon Ramsay said back on the third season of Hell's Kitchen to Rock, who was the winner of that season, and the statement that Gordon Ramsay told him as he counseled him on running the pass was, either you run the kitchen or the kitchen runs you. And when it comes to Tony Khan, it's looking to me like AEW is running Tony Khan, and Tony Khan isn't running AEW. Now, that's a real problem because in a wrestling organization, you need to have strong leadership, and it looks like to me Tony Khan sees AEW from a fanboy's perspective and not from that of a businessman trying to run a wrestling organization and make it competitive. Because what's happening with Tony Khan is that he's basically getting in his feelings about these popular wrestlers and not looking at them as talent that needs to be managed and supervised, and not really thinking about what is in the best interest of his organization. No, he's too caught up in being starstruck about being among popular wrestlers to think about leading those wrestlers and leading that organization in a way that allows it to develop all of its new stars and be able to thrive and be a direct competition to the WWE. Now, the big problem I see with Tony Khan is that he does not know how to lead his locker room. That's something Triple H and Vince McMahon do know how to do, and even wrestlers like The Undertaker know how to lead a locker room, and they understand how important it is to lead a locker room, because if your talent isn't working in harmony, you're going to have a lot of friction, and that's what AEW has had ever since CM Punk has come into the organization, and I dare to say they even had it in the women's locker room with Britt Baker and her huge ego, and that's not really good at being so for you to be able to develop new talent, and it's not a good environment for you to even have the veterans be able to mentor and teach young talent. You're not really getting that synergy because there's no leadership at the top, and that is really reflected in the way Tony Khan has run AEW, and the way he's basically booked all of the talent in that organization. Now, with Tony Khan, again, I'm seeing that the problem is him, and the problem is him because he does not know how to lead his talent, and he does not know how to create an environment where people can feel like they are making a contribution, and that's all due to the way he structured his organization by going out here and having active talent go out here and be the executive vice presidents. Because when you have active talent out here being executive vice presidents, it doesn't allow you an objective perspective as related to finding out who's getting over, or an environment where you got young talent that can be developed like the way Wardlow was going at. I mean, you had basically with Wardlow a guy who was on his way to becoming the next big star, and Tony Khan basically buries his top star instead of developing that star. Same thing with Abaddon, who was coming up in the women's division and getting over. We don't see her on television. No, what he did was, again, bury another talent. And all of this fresh young talent is basically being buried. Meanwhile, we've got ex-WWE getting pushed. And that really, again, shows that Tony Khan is not running AEW, and AEW is basically running him. And the whole CM Punk situation shows how he's basically got stars in his eyes, and because he's got stars in his eyes, he's sitting there thinking he can continue to have this guy in his locker room. But it seems like ever since this guy got in his locker room, it has got progressively worse, and a harmonious work environment has turned more into chaos because you've brought CM Punk in here, and CM Punk, because he wants to do things his way, winds up alienating a lot of talent as related to the worker morale in the organization. Because Jack Perry comes in and he's saying, oh, he wants to use real glass. And again, this is where Tony Khan needs to step in and be a leader, not CM Punk. No, it's Tony Khan who needs to come in and say, Jack, you're my top star. You're one of my pillars of AEW. I don't need you to do a stunt that will get you hurt. I need you to go out here and think about your safety, because if this botch is wrong, it could possibly kill you. And really look out for his stars. But Tony Khan doesn't look out for his stars. And I'll give you an example of that. I look at that whole situation with Dante Martin at the Ring of Honor pay-per-view. Dante Martin was a brilliant wrestler who really needed to be. He was a young kid, about 21, 22 years old. And he's used to doing these high-flying stunts. So they come up with this double table stunt, which if I was running AEW or Ring of Honor, that would be out, because I'm not going to put my talent in a high-risk situation that puts their health in jeopardy. And had Dante Martin do this stunt, which led to him breaking his leg, and that again shows Tony Khan not being a leader as related to looking out for his talent and looking out for the safety of his talent. And again, just the fact that you have one of your pillars of AEW, one of your most over stars, saying he wants to use real glass, and you don't have Tony Khan stepping in like a man to say, hey, Jack, you're not going to do this because this stunt is something that we cannot have you do because, one, you're one of my top stars. Two, we have a liability issue as related to this kind of stunt. And three, I don't want you to put your life in jeopardy. And I would point out about Dante Martin. I would also point out about Owen Hart and try to talk to Jack to let him understand that we're not going to do this stunt. I'm not signing off on this because of the liability issues. But instead of him taking the lead, he has CM Punk do the talking. And again, CM Punk is not supposed to be doing the talking. That's Tony Khan's job. And that just shows how weak of a leader Tony Khan truly is. And it takes me back to the whole situation with Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker. That whole situation, again, was the fault of Tony Khan's lack of leadership. That whole situation between Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa could have been easily resolved by Tony Khan stepping in and saying, okay, Melissa, who's Thunder Rosa's real name, I know that you're injured, so what I want you to do is go out in the ring like you planned. We're going to go out here and have you relinquish the belt in a segment and maybe do a kayfabe injury so that you can go out here and leave out and have your story written out. That's what we're going to do with your character. But instead of him having the character to book some angle so that Melissa Cervantes Thunder Rosa could go out here and deal with her injuries, what he did was the coward's way out by doing that little segment as related to that whole situation and having her say, oh, I have an injury and we're going to have an interim women's champion. That was very cowardly and again showed the weakness of Tony Khan as a leader and showed that he really was not looking to lead his ladies as related to the locker room. And because he didn't lead the locker room by saying that he's the one making the decisions, what happened is we had Britt Baker running the locker room. Again, him coming from a position of weakness, because if you're the boss and you're doing the booking, it's your job to go out here and it's your job to let the talent know that you are the final decision as related to what goes on in your locker room. And in the case of Thunder Rosa, again, she already told you she was injured, and your job at that point was to have her do the segment where she relinquished the belt and then start a tournament for the title. I mean, Tony Khan has the talent, but the problem is that he doesn't have the backbone or the stones to lead AEW. Moreover, he doesn't have the skills as related to telling stories to develop actual characters, and it's a shame because he has a fully stacked roster with some of the best wrestlers from amateurs and the indies and even homegrown talent like Powerhouse Hobbs, but doesn't know how to use that talent. And I look at Tony Khan and he really reminds me of a diner chef who's been given gourmet ingredients, and because he has a diner cook mindset, he's going out here cooking amateur instead of taking things to the next level. I mean, here's a guy who has, again, some of the best talent at AEW, but he doesn't book it properly, and his shows come across as uneven and disjointed as the All-In show at Wembley Stadium. Now, some people will say that it was one of the biggest events and it was very successful as related to money, but as related to creative, it was just absolutely terrible. And it was a terrible show because Tony Khan lacks leadership, and it's a terrible show because he didn't know how to book his talent or build stories. I mean, I look at that whole match with the women where it was only 8 minutes, and then you have Saraya winning out of nowhere with no actual build, no actual story after you've just given Hikaru Shida her second AEW women's title. What you do is go out here and cheapen that belt the same way that Tony Khan cheapened the TNT title with his bad booking after Miro dropped the belt to Sammy, and after he went out here and just basically messed up Hobbs and Wardlow with the booking. Again, the problem at AEW is not the wrestlers, the problem is Tony Khan, and the problem is Tony Khan does not know how to lead a wrestling organization. Yes, he's a wrestling fan with a big love for wrestling, but you need to understand that this is a business, and in a business you need to do two things. One, you have to know how to lead your people, and two, you have to know how to have a vision for what you want to do with them once you bring them into the organization. And what Tony Khan does is he waits for Vince McMahon and Triple H to release wrestlers, then he goes out here and hires those wrestlers, but he doesn't have a vision or a plan for those wrestlers, and that really leads to the just slipshod and half-done booking I've seen over the last 3 or 4 years, where he'll get a talent like a Keith Lee, then won't know what to do with that talent, won't have a plan to what to do with that talent. I mean, here you have one of the most agile big men in wrestling, just like you do with Miro. You have one of the best wrestlers, but you don't know how to write a story for that wrestler, don't know how to develop a story for that wrestler, don't know how to craft a feud for that wrestler to develop their character or set a direction for their character. And what happens with that wrestler is that we see them once, they disappear for months on end, and we never get to see this character develop or grow. Then they pop up out of nowhere, show up for a pay-per-view here or there, and characters never really actualize their potential or really transform in a story arc, all because of the lack of leadership, lack of vision, and lack of direction from Tony Khan, who is the big problem at AEW. He's been the problem since day one because he's the one sitting there. He'll see wrestlers getting over, and he won't go out here and look to develop them as characters. He won't look to develop their stories. He won't look to let us get to know them as people. He won't go out here and put in the work in crafting characters and crafting feuds that can go out here and let us really connect with these wrestlers as their characters. He goes out here, and what he does is just, again, he'll introduce somebody, they'll show up, they'll have a match. Yes, the match will be very nice, but the whole thing is, because there's no story, there's nothing to resonate with viewers, and with no story to resonate with viewers, what happens is you get chaos, and even worse, you get a backstage situation where you have people like CM Punk who are not really being told who is the boss. And what happens is you got guys like CM Punk going into business for himself, like he did recently on Collision with Hangman, looking to feud with him again, and again, looking to go out here and now further getting into it with guys like Jack Perry. Again, the problem isn't the wrestlers, the problem is the leadership. And again, Tony Khan is not running AEW. AEW is running him. And when you have a wrestling organization that's a rudderless ship, it's basically going to run into the ground the same way that WCW 2000 crashed and burned, because WCW was not being run by anyone at that point. No, WCW in 2000 was basically running itself, and as it ran itself straight into the ground. And when you're running a wrestling organization, again, it all is based on the leadership. It's all based on the vision of the leadership. It's all based on where the leadership wants to go. And if you're not running the wrestling ring, if you're not running the booking, if you're not running the writing, then the organization is going to run you. And if it's running itself, then all you're going to get with a wrestling organization is run straight into the ground. Now, if you want to pick up my book, which is a tribute to my love for pro wrestling, ISIS the Main Event, you can find that book on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format, and you can find it at other online booksellers in paperback format, such as Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, and other online booksellers all across the globe. And if you want to pick up some of my other action-packed fantasy fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like other books in the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, my Vampire Eternal Night novel, Eternal Night, my business novel, Recipe for Success, and my sorority novel, The Thetas, and my men's issues books, you can find all those books on Amazon.com and other online booksellers as well. And if you want to pick up my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, you can find that comic on Lulu.com in paperback format. And if you want to pick up my first digital comic, Esteem No Good Deed, you can find that comic on Kindle for 99 cents. And if you want to see me do more videos about wrestling, you can send a donation to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS, All About the Goddess. The Goddess Next Door bears all in the art studio to catch a campus stalker in this action-packed ISIS series mystery. Get your copy of ISIS, All About the Goddess in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.